The people who seem less fortunate than you, which used to be me, one day you may see that person in your not too distant future, and that may be the person you're going to have to answer to or spend this big check on, and you would have had no way of recognizing that person as that janitor that I used to be. So I try to make sure that I pick everyone up at every single opportunity, because I don't know when I'm going to see them again or at what level.
That was TJ Tennent. TJ is a motivational speaker, forensics expert, and entrepreneur who found a way to channel negativity in his life for the greater good for himself and for those around him. He's a natural-born teacher who has channeled his longtime passion for all things automotive to create a global tire forensics business that is building great momentum. In this Squeeze the Day, let's learn how turning lemons to lemonade have created a rosy future and a new beginning for this engineer turned entrepreneur.
I'm Sally Hussey, the CEO of 50 Forward, and we're glad you joined us to hear inspiring stories from older adults. Their words of wisdom are well worth sharing as we seek to navigate a meaningful and purpose-driven second chapter in our life. This podcast is made possible through the work of 50 Forward and our mission to support, champion, and enhance the lives of those 50 and older.
Today's Squeeze the Day is brought to you by the All of Us Research Program from the National Institutes of Health. Learn how you can help change the future of health by participating in the program. Visit www.joinallofus.org to learn more. I'm Susan Sizemore, Communications Director of 50 Forward. So let's get started. Welcome, TJ.
Hi, Susan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am mostly sunny as always.
I'd be sad if you started our conversation without that line.
Many TJs came to an end before that line was perfected.
Oh, let's talk about that. So many folks have reinvented themselves in their second chapter at the age of 50-something. And as your encore career, you became a tire forensics expert. Tell us about that.
Yes. Before I retired from Bridgestone, I was training law enforcement in tire forensics, and basically why do tires fail, so they could make the proper call on their reports. And it became really popular in the law enforcement field. And when they found out that I had retired, they started asking for training. And in the process of that training, attorneys started calling me, asking me if I could be an expert witness. And so that's how we started.
That seems like that cool discovery stuff that's included in movies in the crime scene series. What exactly does a tire forensics expert do? And can you tell us about one of the most unusual or interesting puzzles you had to solve?
Yes. A tire forensics expert, they are extremely rare. And the ones that are available, there's maybe 10 of us in the whole world that are well known, and 6 of them work for me. And one of the things that we do is we train law enforcement in tire forensics. We also train emergency vehicle technicians. Those are the men and women who keep ambulances and fire apparatuses running. But in the most basic of basic definitions, if there's an accident and someone becomes deceased or severely injured, and what I mean by severely injured is they're now a paraplegic or quadriplegic, then my phone rings. And our job then is to go take a look at the tire and the vehicle and the accident information and try to decide if the tire was defective from the factory, or the tire was not well maintained, or it was something else. It could be a road hazard or something like that. And sometimes we testify in court if we need to, but most of the cases that we work are settled long before court.
So interesting. How do you market yourself in that industry?
We don't really do any marketing other than business cards. Almost 100% of the people who know us by word of mouth. We have done this type of training literally all over the world, in Australia, South Africa, and Canada, almost everywhere. And so one of the nicknames that I just got last week from a global event was, let me make sure I get this right, the godfather of tire forensics.
Well, hello. Good to meet you.
But it is truly the best job in the world. One of the coolest cases we had is that everything burned up, the tires, the vehicle, everything. We had two cases like that. And both drivers said that the tires blew out and the vehicle rolled over and caught fire. One was in Australia and one was in the US. And it was kind of funny because they said, hey, they showed me these pictures of some burned up vehicles. And they said, is it possible for you to take a look at these pictures and tell us what happened? And I said, yeah, I think so. But we were able to figure out what happened. And in one case, there was no tire failure. And in the other one, there was clearly a tire failure. So we incorporated all of that into our training material.
You and I know firsthand the important role that tires play on a vehicle and also what the role that proper inflation plays. And while we're not in the industry of selling tires, we do take those lessons forward. They're life-saving.
They really are, more than you know, because in every single case that we get, every one of them involves either improper tire pressure or the improper application of the tire. And that's what caused the tire to fail. And I'm still shocked to this day when a law enforcement officer or a reconstructionist or a fleet manager says, oh, I didn't know that. And I think, unfortunately, the tire industry hasn't done a superb job. I guess they've done what they could up to a point, but they haven't done as well as they should so that we could limit the loss of life in the field that I'm in.
So important. I think it's really interesting, too, that you retired, but then you got back into a similar industry and you've become such a specialist, but also an entrepreneur. So what would you tell others about becoming an entrepreneur?
You know, when people ask me that question, the first thing I say is that all these other people come from other countries. They don't speak the language over here. And the first thing they do is start a business. You don't need any specific education. You don't need any specific skill set, depending on what you're doing, you would to do what we do. But there's a reason for that, because here in the U.S., we do a great job of teaching the people of the U.S. how to go to work for someone else. In other countries, they do a really good job of teaching you to start a business. And you probably remember, as I do, when I was younger in elementary school and high school, my parents would always say, hey, what are you going to do when you grow up? And that basically meant, who are you going to work for when you grow up? So it's not always known in the U.S. that you can start your own business. And now that I'm older, I'm 59 now, and I've had an opportunity to start this business, actually not on purpose. It kind of just bloomed on its own. It is the most fun, the most aggressive, the most inspiring, the hardest, the most frustrating thing that I've ever done in my entire life, but I would never, ever, ever trade it for anything else. The amount of time that I get to spend with my family, the amount of time that I get to spend with the people who work with me. And I look at having my own business with employees a little differently, because they're not my employees, because I cannot, under any circumstances, do this without them. They all, including their significant others, are my extended family. So they're never employees. They're my extended family, and I treat them as such.
That's just marvelous. Tell us about your education, how you got started in the automotive and/or tire business.
I had an academic scholarship to engineering in college. And I was married at the time, so I had a full ride, and my wife got pregnant. I had to drop out, and that was tough, but I had to take care of my family, which I did do. And I intended to go back. Believe it or not, I never went back to college. I had 2 years, and that's it. So as I was kind of bouncing around trying to figure out what I needed to do with myself and my life and this new family that I had acquired, my father had his own business. He had a small business. He was a welder and he did pipe fitting and stuff like that. So I kind of worked with him for a little bit. And to be honest, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Even when I went to college, my parents said, you should go into engineering because you're good in math and science.
Mm.
I said, okay, I don't know what else to do. Maybe I can do that. And other people obviously thought I was too because they gave me a scholarship, which was kind of nice. But when I look at what I do today, if you had asked me even 5 years ago, before I retired from the major tire company that I was working, I still would not have been able to tell you what I wanted to do. I thought I'd be there, I'd retire and live a regular life like everyone else. And then my phone started to ring, and it was kind of shocking me because I didn't think that I was that far above everyone else as far as determining why tires came out of service. But then I started to realize my experiences and some of the practice that I learned were a lot more intensive than anyone else, including the people that work with me. And I said, wow, maybe I should continue this training thing. And I didn't know how much to charge or anything like that. So I started to charge more and more money. Now, sometimes at night, I lie in bed and talk to my wife and say, can you believe how much people pay us for what I have up here in this big head I'm carrying around? And the thing that's interesting, my dad used to tell this story about being, and the name of the story is Being the Obvious Choice. And you can look me up on LinkedIn or actually on YouTube and look for that story. It's called Being the Obvious Choice. And what that means is that you are so good in your chosen field of expertise that anytime a conversation comes up about that field of expertise, your name should come up. And if that happens, it takes out race, sexual orientation, religious beliefs, any of that, and it waters everything down to that almighty dollar. And I found that to be true because even though we are really, really expensive to retain, no one, absolutely no one, ever asks us how much we charge. And I think they don't because they feel like without us, they can't properly defend their case or prosecute their case. And we do criminal and civil matters. And because of that, it has allowed me to live a very different lifestyle than I've ever lived. And it also allows the people who work with me to live a different lifestyle. But working with us isn't just about the job. It's about enjoying your life more than you ever have before. The people who work with me are required, and it's not optional if your child has a recital or a baseball game or any of that. You are required to participate. It doesn't matter what you're doing. We've got enough people to fill in your slot that you are mandated to participate in your family's life. And for me, that's just as important as them working for me. Even when we interview people, you and your significant other have to interview. And I know that sounds really weird, but it's very important for both of you to get a feeling of who TJ Tennent is. It's important for TJ Tennent to get a feeling for you and your significant other, because I'm not hiring one person. I'm hiring that whole family. And if I ask that person, and we have men and women and different races that work for us, that's accidental too, but I'm glad it happened, that I may have to ask you next year to go to Australia to help us start up a satellite office. You may be there for 2 months. That's a big ask. So I need not only you, but also your significant other to trust that I'm not going to put you in harm's way.
It's a really interesting business philosophy for sure. I want to talk a little bit about networking. You're a keen networker and a facilitator. And how did that come about? And why is that so important to you?
I'm going to start out with a statement that I use a lot. And that statement is people should be better off having met me than if they had never met me. And you're right. I network at every opportunity. I was at the gas station in one of my little fancy cars the other day, and a man was there with his son. And it's a really expensive car. And I said, hey, and the man said, hey, we really like your car. And I said, do you want to sit in it? And they're like, I'm sorry. I said, bring your son over, let him sit in it. And I asked their name, said, do you have a camera? Let's take a picture of you in this car and you can show it to your friends. And people don't expect that. And the next thing I do is give them my card. And if I'm going to run a business that operates solely on word of mouth, And we just released our website like this week, literally, like a couple days ago. And 100% of the people say, 100% of the attorneys, the insurance companies, we always ask, how did you find out who we were? Because we don't advertise. Oh, such and such said he took your class. He said you were fabulous. I would love you and we should hire you. Then I must continue networking. And that's whether I give out a business card or one of the things that I really like to do. I was at a resort last week teaching a class and a janitor was there. And this is where we as a society in the US don't really do things the way we should. The janitor was there. He was changing the trash in front of the elevator. And I said, hey, how you doing? And he was shocked that I spoke to him because he said, most people don't see me. You're the only person that spoke to me this morning. And I told that janitor, I said, I spoke to you because I used to be you. Don't let all the glitz and the glamour that surrounded me fool you. I was literally you. And don't be surprised at what you, as a human being, can be able to accomplish in your life. So networking should happen at every single level of your life. And the people who seem less fortunate than you, which used to be me, one day you may see that person in your not too distant future, and that may be the person you're going to have to answer to or spend this big check on, and you would have had no way of recognizing that person as that janitor that I used to be and that man was, instead of the godfather of tires. So I try to make sure that I pick everyone up I assist them in picking themselves up by their bootstraps at every single opportunity, because I don't know when I'm going to see them again or at what level.
That's really beautiful. So I want to ask you something, too, that you touched on at the top of our conversation. You opened with, I'm mostly sunny. And I know from past conversations with you that you've had to learn to channel your negativity and anger management into positives. And I want you to talk a little bit about that and how others can learn from your example.
It's really important. I had another nickname back when I lived in Dallas many moons ago, and it was Angry TJ. There was a AM radio show host. We'd argue with each other. I'd argue with anybody back then. And I just wasn't a nice guy. I'll admit that. And I'm a big guy. I'm like 300 pounds. I'm 6'4" and kind of buff. And I can be an intimidating person if I wanted to be. And I was at work one day and somebody said that, I don't talk to Mr. Tennent because he is just intimidating. And I didn't realize that's who I was. And I went up to someone who knew me within the building, a female, and said, hey, am I intimidating? Because I was totally shocked that people saw me that way. And she says, when you first started here, I didn't mess with you because you had this really angry look on your face and you never really talked to anybody. And I was like, wow, how messed up is that I didn't see that in myself? And within myself, there were some other experiences that honed me into the TJ that a lot of people know today. And I decided I would change who TJ was spiritually, physically, and mentally. And to make a long story short, that particular time in my life, I was really poor. I didn't have any electricity. I didn't have any credit, didn't even have a car. Something happened. And at that time, I decided to say, the weatherman was on television. He said, it's going to be a mostly sunny day today, folks. And I stopped and I looked within myself and I said, you know what? I didn't say if I get on top. I said when, which was pretty phenomenal to say because I didn't know if I was going to get back on top. And I said, from now, when someone says, hello, how are you doing? Or good morning or anything, I'm going to say mostly sunny. It'll remind me of where I was in my life at that time. It'll keep me humble. And it's a point of conversation because some people will say, well, why'd you say that? And then I get to tell them that story about my uprising to who I am now, spiritually, mentally, physically, and socially. And that's why I say mostly sunny, to remind me, hey, you can be that, again, the guy changing the trash out at any day. So you better humble yourself and enjoy not only everyone you meet, but every day that you get to live.
So did you ever think that you'd become a motivational speaker?
No. That also came by accident. I was in Toastmasters and I was winning all these contests and everything. And someone asked me to do a keynote, and I was like, what? And they said, yeah, you're obviously a speaker. And I didn't realize who I was then either. And I didn't charge them anything because I didn't think I was a keynote or anything. And it went really well. I actually got a standing ovation, and the guy was like, that's the first keynote speaker we've ever had that got a standing ovation. So the way that we do our educational section of tire forensics, I start out with, this isn't going to just be technical. It's going to be about life and success in life. And after I started incorporating the life lessons into the technical stuff, people started asking. I was able to double dip because they would pay us to do the technical education. And then they'd say, hey, TJ, we need you to do a 45-minute speech or hour speech over dinner. And the next thing I'd say was, okay, sure. What do you want me to talk about? And that became equally as successful as the education part. And I use those same skills in the courtroom and in everyday life.
And that also, when you're talking about everyday life, I want to just mention the fact that you're a husband and a father. Tell us about lifting others up, and especially the next generation.
Oh, it is so important. You're lifting people up or bringing them down, whether you want to or not, because Generation Z, Generation X are watching you. And someone like me, if I'm doing an audience like I just did with 500 people in there, afterwards, what I noticed was a lot of the speakers, they just, well, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, give me my check so I can leave. The way that I look at that is that it's humbling that I was even asked to come speak. So I'm going to stay and I'm going to shake every hand and I'm going to talk to every person that's there that wants to talk. And I don't care if it takes 6 extra hours, I'm going to do that. So one of the things that I started doing here where I live in Nashville is I'm in the Italian Car Club, and we take some of the cars to some of the high schools in the more challenged areas. And the cars kind of are the hook to get them interested. And then after we let them sit in the cars and we talk about the cars, we sit down and talk to them about how you can't purchase a car like this from jail. You can't purchase a car like this if you're selling drugs. That's got a separate end. We talk to them about being honest. And one of the things that shocked me about a lot of them have children. And you have a responsibility as a father and a mother to set the right lifestyle and situational awareness for your children. With my son, the best thing that I ever did was start working for myself. And he comes into my office every day around 6 a.m. And my office is set up so if someone walks in, I have to turn around 180 degrees and turn away purposely from my laptop. And I talk to him for as long as he wants about anything that he wants. And it has made our relationship infinitely better than I had ever imagined that I thought I wanted it to be. The same thing with my wife. My wife just recently got over cancer. She told me she was diagnosed 30 days, almost to the date after my father had passed. And I remember coming into my office here in my house and thinking and praying and saying, God, what have I done to deserve this? You've taken my father. Hopefully you don't take my best friend, my business partner, my soulmate from me. And I sat down and regrouped and I realized, okay, I'm being selfish. My wife needs me. And so does my son. And I told my wife, I said, look, you don't need to go back to work ever again. We're making enough money so that our family is secure financially. Your job is to heal and be happy. And whatever I can do to give you those two things, if I hadn't already done it, let me know. My wife she's only a couple of treatments away and she's past the cancer, but I was able to be there for her. And one of the things that she told me, because her mother also passed from cancer, was that this is her talking to me. I could not have imagined how hard it was for my mother to not have anybody there with her, such as you, to take care of her.
Hmm.
And I was doing that just because I loved and still love her. And she's now getting back to where she needs to be. Her biggest concern now is getting her hair cut because it's growing too quickly. But being able to be here for my family, I got to tell you, Susan, there is no amount of money, there is no amount of fortune or fame that I would ever, ever want to have that could replace them. And that has paid off in spades. My wife and my son are my best friends. They're my best mates. It's so important for a couple to support each other. And that's not just about somewhere to stay or lay your head, supporting each other often. And I think it's important for a couple to tell each other about how they feel. And that means a lot, especially men, because men are not very good at that. They think they need to be, masculine. No, the biggest thing that I've learned from women is to allow my feelings to come out and to talk about how I'm feeling.
So I've got a few quick questions that you can give us your quick response. We'll call it speed revolutions just for you, you tire guy.
Okay.
So what would you tell your younger self?
Be patient.
Who would you like to trade places with for 24 hours?
My father.
And what's your hobby?
I don't know if you guys can see it, but I have several guitars behind me. They settle me down. I don't know why I like playing guitar. Maybe it's the math that's in the music, I think. But that's what I do to settle myself down, whether I'm home or traveling.
So here's a question we ask all of our guests. What's one piece of advice your parents or an older adult might have shared with you that at the time you thought, that's pretty silly, but today that rings true to you in your everyday life?
There was a dark period in my life where I was just going through a lot of things, mental and physical. And I remember talking to my mother, and she said, TJ, there's always light at the end of the tunnel. And I told her, well, there may be, Mother, but I don't see it right now. And she says, very slowly, TJ, there is always light at the end of the tunnel. It doesn't matter how bad things are.
And then, TJ, what is it that you do to squeeze the day?
I have a picture window in front of me that you can't see. Every morning, this is a routine that I do. I go outside, no matter how good or bad the weather is, and thank God for giving me another day. And I promise him that I'm going to start out every day, mostly sunny, and enjoy the opportunity to live one more day on this beautiful marble that we're on.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Your story is inspiring and reinforces that challenges can become opportunities. We can learn so much from one another and certainly from the experiences of those in their second chapter of life. Now we challenge everyone listening to go squeeze the day. Squeeze the Day is made possible through listeners like you. If you enjoy this podcast, please help us continue to share inspiring stories of older adults and visit 50forward.org to make a contribution. That's FIFTYFORWARD.org. Let's support, champion, and enhance the lives of older adults together.